Chosen one, listen carefully. Something has shifted in the spirit, and the people who once spoke over you like you were weak, delayed, replaceable, and easy to control can feel it now. That silence around you is not random. That tension you keep noticing is not your imagination. Heaven has exposed what hell was trying to hide. The same people who were comfortable watching you suffer are suddenly nervous, suddenly careful, suddenly watching their words. Why? Because what they meant for your ending became the very thing God used for your elevation. They thought you were still in the breaking stage. They thought you were still crying over what left, still confused over what happened, still vulnerable to the same voices that once manipulated your emotions. But what they failed to understand is this: while they were studying your pain, God was completing your transformation. While they were waiting for you to collapse, the Lord was teaching your hands to war and your heart to endure. While they were expecting another emotional reaction, heaven was building a version of you that no longer bends under pressure. And now they're panicking, because the door they thought would always be open to them is shut. The access they took for granted is gone. The version of you they knew how to influence no longer exists. That is why they sent him, not because they care, not because they suddenly found compassion, not because they woke up righteous overnight. They sent him because fear finally entered the room. They sent the one voice they thought might still reach you, the one person they believed could still slow you down, the one man they trusted to step in before everything fully turned in your favor. But when they begged him to save you, to stop you, to warn you before you moved too far beyond their reach, he didn't argue. He didn't panic, he didn't rush, he just grinned and said, "Too late." Before we go deeper, take a second and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and if this message is speaking directly to your spirit, comment 777 below. Let it be your sign that you're still standing, still discerning, and still chosen. Now listen. Too late hit them so hard because they already knew what it meant. It meant heaven had already made its move. It meant your season of begging, doubting, over-explaining, and shrinking was over. It meant the wilderness did not kill you. It anointed you. It meant the attack did not weaken you. It trained you. It meant the isolation was not punishment. It was preparation. And what terrifies them most is not that you became louder, it's that you became clear. There is a kind of danger that comes from anger, but there is another kind that comes from spiritual closure. Anger is noisy. Closure is silent. Anger reacts. Closure moves. Anger still looks back. Closure has already buried the old version and walked away. That is the version of you they are facing now. Calm, disciplined, watchful, no longer hungry for approval, no longer broken by rejection, no longer available for emotional games. That is why the warning came late, because warnings are only sent when control is slipping. Let me say that again. People do not send messengers when they are winning. They send messengers when they realize they are losing ground and running out of options. If you were still weak, they would ignore you. If you were still dependent, they would laugh at you. If you were still easy to distract, they would keep playing with your mind. But the moment they gathered, whispered, and started strategizing about how to reach you, they revealed the truth without meaning to. You are no longer manageable. That meeting behind closed doors was not concern, it was damage control. They weren't discussing your future. They were mourning the fact that they no longer had influence over it. Every sentence dressed itself up as wisdom, but underneath it was fear. Fear that you would keep walking with God. Fear that you would keep healing. Fear that you would keep rising without their permission. Fear that your life would become proof that everything they said about you was a lie. And when they looked at him, they wanted comfort. They wanted reassurance. They wanted him to tell them there was still a chance to stop what God had started in you. But he smiled, because he could see what they refused to accept. He could see that this was not a phase. This was not temporary emotion. This was not another cycle. This was completion. Chosen one, some of you need to hear this next part with your whole spirit. They did not lose you when they hurt you. They lost you when you healed. They did not lose power when you cried. They lost power when you stopped needing them to understand you. They did not lose control when you spoke up. They lost control when your silence stopped being wounded and started being governed. That is the part they miscalculated. They misread your quiet season. They thought because you went still, you had surrendered. They thought because you withdrew, you had given up. They thought because you stopped explaining yourself, you were ashamed. But no, you were rebuilding in secret. You were learning how to hear God above the noise. You were learning how to obey without applause. You were learning how to move without announcing every step. And by the time they noticed the difference, the roots were already too deep. A seed does not ask permission before it breaks the ground. And a chosen one does not need validation once God has spoken. That is why too late was not an insult. It was a verdict. It meant the process had already finished underground. It meant the old chains no longer fit your spirit. It meant the emotional hooks that once worked on you had rusted and fallen apart. It meant they were trying to speak to a version of you that had already died. You have to understand this clearly. God will let your enemies watch from a distance while He transforms you in private. He will let them think nothing is happening while heaven is rewriting your nature. He will let them underestimate you while your discernment sharpens, your boundaries strengthen, your confidence stabilizes, and your dependence on human approval breaks completely. Then one day, without warning, your presence changes the room, and suddenly everyone who was comfortable mishandling you becomes uncomfortable around you. Not because you threatened them, because you no longer need them. That kind of freedom is terrifying to controlling people. People who live off guilt, confusion, dependency, and emotional access cannot function around someone who has been made whole by God. They need reactions. They need insecurity. They need you to still be reachable through pain. But once the Lord heals your core, manipulation has nowhere to land. That is why they are not really afraid you will fall. They are afraid you will finish. Because completion exposes counterfeit power. Completion reveals who was feeding off your weakness. Completion makes old titles irrelevant. Completion turns gatekeepers into spectators. Once you become who God called you to be, people who built their identity around limiting you suddenly have nothing left to stand on. And that is where many chosen ones get tested one last time. You start hearing whispers again. Maybe I should explain. Maybe I should slow down. Maybe I should hear them out. But hear me in the spirit. That urge is not wisdom. It is the final echo of an expired version of you. The old you would have bent. The healed you discerns and keeps moving. The delivered you understands that not every apology deserves access. Not every warning deserves attention. And not every messenger deserves a door back into your life. Some people do not miss you. They miss their influence. Some people are not grieving the relationship. They are grieving the loss of control. And some people are not afraid for your future. They are afraid of what your future says about them. That is why his grin shook them, because he recognized the end before they did. He had seen enough to know that your pain had already been converted into power. He could tell that the betrayal had refined you, not ruined you. He could tell that the rejection had taught you discernment. He could tell that the loneliness had driven you into the presence of God so deeply that now you carry a peace they cannot interrupt. That is what too late really meant. Too late to guilt you. Too late to confuse you. Too late to pull you back into old cycles. Too late to use love as a leash. Too late to call your obedience pride. Too late to label your boundaries rebellion. Too late to stop what God already sealed. Chosen one, you are not in the middle anymore. You are on the other side of something. On the other side of begging. On the other side of explaining. On the other side of trying to be small enough for broken people to feel comfortable around you. And yes, that makes some people nervous. Let them be nervous. You were nervous when you were losing sleep. You were nervous when you were carrying burdens God never assigned to you. You were nervous when you were fighting invisible warfare with nobody to talk to but heaven. But look at you now, steadier, sharper, more guarded, but more anointed, less available, but more aligned, quieter, but more powerful. This is what they did not plan for. They expected survival. God produced authority. They expected damage. God brought deliverance. They expected a wounded version of you they could still influence. God raised up someone who knows who they are. So if this message is for you, receive it without fear. Nobody can rescue you from what God has already ordained. Nobody can reverse what obedience has built. Nobody can cancel what heaven has confirmed. The reason the warning sounded desperate is because it was. The reason the messenger smiled is because he knew. And the reason they are scrambling now is because the clock they trusted ran out while you were being remade in secret. Too late. Too late for the sabotage. Too late for the delay. Too late for the spiritual ambush. Too late for the voices that once kept you doubting yourself. Too late for the hands that only reached for you when they felt you slipping away. You did not go too far. You went forward. And forward is exactly where God intended you to go. If this word found you at the right moment, hold on to it. Let it settle deep. And remember this: they begged him to save you because they thought you were still theirs to influence. But he grinned and said, too late, because heaven had already claimed what hell could no longer touch. Stay alert, stay obedient, stay set apart, and above all, keep moving.